und wird ein paar Fragen beantworten von Peter Kern. Also jeder, der hier Alan Wilder Fragen stellen möchte, kann hier warten. And that's again in English. There will be a Q&A with Alan Wilder in a few minutes right at this stage together with Peter Kern. So if you are here for the Retune conference or for the Q&A with Alan Wilder, just wait for a few minutes. Alan is already here and will be at this stage in a few minutes. Thank you.
Good evening. So we're beginning what will be the first of two talks. You get two talks with Alan tonight, and the second one is happening just after the second screening. So I don't actually know what time it is. Later. Louder. Okay. So it's my pleasure to introduce Alan. We're going to have a conversation this evening. We're going to talk a little bit about. We don't actually know what we're going to talk about, but it's going to be fascinating. My name is Peter. I run a site called Create Digital Music, and also write for Keyboard Magazine in the United States. Yeah. Is that actually a woo for Keyboard Magazine in the US? This is definitely an audience that's a fan of Depeche Mode and Recoil. Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about, hopefully about Alan's kind of sense of technology. So what's going on in the next room, so we're here in Prince Charles. What's happening in the next room is a conference called Retune. And there's a kind of amazing eclectic group of people in Retune. Everybody from people building new kind of modeling compounds, with things that you physically can prototype stuff out of.
We don't see nothing.
Well, okay, can somebody turn up our sound on stage, or will that create feedback? Because my mouth can't get any closer to this microphone without it becoming kind of obscene. Okay, so so there's a conference going on next to the club because it's Berlin, and there's always 10 things happening at once, and it's always kind of a surprise how they relate to one another. So there's this conference going on next door to us, where people are inventing new modeling compounds and wearable technology and talking about how to build new musical instruments and all kinds of different things. So what I hope we could talk about tonight, the two of us, is a little bit about your sense of what some of those tools have meant to you, and kind of what you have lots of chance to talk about what you've done in the past, to talk a little bit about what you're doing now, kind of where your musical head is at.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Can you hear? Yeah? I don't know what he's going on about, but he asked me to come and talk. We're going to do a slightly longer talk a bit later on about the film and all that stuff next door after the second screening. So I hope some of you saw the first screening anyway, and as I say, we'll try and talk a bit more about that later on. But Peter here, he asked me if we would do a bit more of a technical talk, so I hope it's not too boring. I'll try not to be boring, all right? So to answer his question, really, I have to say first of all, Peter, I'm really not that technical, okay? I'm not.
Well, I don't mean technical in the sense of
one.
yeah. Not in the sense of kind of like I don't know, plugging cables together.
Yeah. Well,
but in terms of what this stuff means for what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, when I'm working in the studio, as many will know here, I work often with Paul Kendall, and Paul Kendall is here tonight. And but he's hiding somewhere, the bastard. Where is he? Anyway,
Watching
so when we're in the studio together, I will do the more sort of musical aspects probably. In other words, construct, orchestrate the music more, and then I'll give it to Paul to bring his kind of left-wing approach to it. He comes from a very different musical background to me. He's more from an engineering background, and so I like to give him the more musical aspects and let him fuck them up, really, you know. He sticks him through all his toys and effects, and he very much concentrates on the vocals and the particular effects and the spatial stuff you hear within the stereo picture of what we do. So I think what we end up is a really good team of people who don't cross over too much. And that's quite interesting in some ways, because in Depeche Mode we also were able to allocate each person's role so that we didn't cross over too much. And I'm sure I don't have to tell many here how we used to work in the band, where Martin was very much concentrating on songs, I was very much concentrating on the production and the arrangements. And so we complemented each other in that sense. So to kind of try to answer your question, my approach is really more to do with finding a good relationship in the studio, finding someone to work with, if I'm working with other people, who do different things to what I do. And between us, we're able to use whatever technology we use, and it's not that much, to try to create the sound picture that we get. I can tell you more about the technical aspects. We use Logic Audio, we use Pro Tools, we use a little bit of Ableton Live. Not so much in the studio, but for the live presentations we use Ableton more. But really, I'm much more focused on the music aspects, the arrangement of how the music should sound, and less so on the special effects and the technology. You know?
Sure. Yeah. No. I mean, you would hope that you would be. One question I had actually, going back and looking at, I just did a book project where we look back at old issues of Keyboard Magazine, and all the kind of technical complaints about stuff that wasn't working then. So there's a lot of nostalgia now about technology from 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. Is your sense, because some of the people who work on this stuff may be in this room, live in the city, is your sense that stuff is working better than it was when you started?
I think when you look back over maybe 20 years or more of recording, and you remember how you used to work, you tend to view it with rose-tinted spectacles. You know, oh, wasn't it great what we used to do in those days? You know, wasn't it profound? You know, some of the ideas we had and no one else was trying out. But actually, the truth is that it was just a lot harder to achieve than you can now. The problem these days is because everything is so much easier technically, it can have the effect of making one not try quite so hard. And if there's any positives I can say about struggling with the technology 25 years ago when we first got the synclavier, or we first got MIDI to CV and tried to sync everything in time, all those many days we would spend in Hansa Studios trying to get sounds to sync together, and you know, running click tracks and trying to make sure that the music to that click didn't keep moving around. And I used to tear my hair out because I'm kind of perfectionist and I love precision. These days, that's not a problem anymore. You know, it just happens and it's all there, and people don't have to try and worry about all that stuff. So whilst that's good, you know, the fact that we had to go through a lot more to get to where we wanted to get to, perhaps gave more interesting results. You know, it would take you on journeys you didn't really expect to go on, frustrating ones sometimes, but you'd get to somewhere that was very different sounding.
I mean, do you find that happens? Do you find that the stuff that you're doing now sounds different as a result of it being more accessible in that way?
I try to still place emphasis on ideas, good ideas, creative ideas. I'm talking loudly. I'm trying my best.
Anyone controlling sound, if you can make us louder.
Turn the PA up,
light,
somebody, please.
I have no power over this. I would love to be able to do it from here. Yes, so whoever has sound, louder. Cool.
What was I saying? Can't remember now. I've bored myself stupid.
We have stools. We can sit on the
No,
stools.
I like to. Ask me some more questions.
Yeah, no, I think, well, because, one question that I hear from a lot of people is, I think that you have such access to your ideas. You hear them right away, and then you hear them over and over again. So, with machines, especially when you're going to reel, you commit. With the computer, you hear everything, you hear it over and over again. I mean, does this happen to you? I hear this from people, advanced people, beginners, where you kind of hear it again and again and it stops making sense, but you can hear it all those times?
Of course.
Or you adapt it? Yeah.
It happens to everybody who's making a record, the loss of perspective. Yes, you bore yourself, I'm boring myself again. You bore yourself stupid because you just get to beyond enjoying what you're doing. Even though you may have something good, you kind of can't get off on it anymore. So it's those magical moments when you first get an idea or some accident happens, they're the things you live for and thrive on in the studio, and you have to try to retain that feeling and say, okay, I know that's good, and now I'm going to do something that's going to complement that. But yes, it is a problem listening to stuff over and over again and having too much choice, is what you're saying. You used to have to commit it to tape and live with it. Now you can just endlessly be in mix mode. You're recording your music in mix mode all the time. 20 years ago we didn't do that. We had recording sessions and then we had the mixing sessions, and we committed everything to tape. And now we had to mix it and just get the best from what we had. But now you just can continually go back and say, oh, I'm going to change it again and again and again. So perspective, I think, is something that all musicians and recording artists struggle from.
Well, so how do you get back to that? I mean, I know when I talked to Martin about the last record, he went back to some of these old machines to get some of that feeling back. But you've kind of stuck, it seems like you've stuck to the computers. How do you get that, the question is, how do you get off to use your...
Well, going to machines is not going to give you creativity, really.
Sure.
I think it's kind of a sort of cheap route to try and get a spark of an idea, which is all right,
Maybe it can be a lot of fun, right?
Exactly. Maybe you can try out 50 different machines and you get one great idea, there's an accident, and off you go. I'm more interested in sort of feeling, sampling loops of performance, something that has inherent humanity within it. And they're the things that spark my imagination more than which clever synthesizer I can use today. I tend to keep my working methods quite simple. It's sampled loops of bits of performance which I reconstruct using the technology to create something that couldn't really be played. And that's really what Recoil does, and always has done.
So, I mean, since we have an audience of people who may not know kind of how that process works, can you kind of walk us through musically? How do you go about that? When you say reconstructing these performances, what do you mean?
Well, I have a huge library of bits of music, bits of performance, from old band sessions to CDs to anything I can find. And I'll just kind of find a spark of an idea and create a loop. And then I'll use that to jump to the next idea. And it's really a giant jigsaw. You try to let one idea or one experiment lead to the next until you get a feeling back from the music. It's not until I get some kind of reaction, an emotional reaction myself for whatever idea I'm trying, that I can move on to the next stage. So it's a giant experiment for me. I don't know what I'm making at the time. I just trust in my process that if I follow my instincts and follow what I react to emotionally, I know that I'll end up with something that sounds like my music. And that's as far as I think about it, So it will be, if we're talking more technically, it will be a loop put into just an arrange page within Logic, and then I'll add another loop to it, and then I'll start to arrange that into something that, some kind of very loose structure of a piece of music. Then I'll bring in maybe some vocal sample which could easily get discarded later. And it's just a continuing process like that. Perhaps I'll suddenly switch the PA on.
Okay, now, can you remember everything you just said and say
Sorry if you couldn't hear any of that, but it was really boring anyway, so don't worry.
No, hold on. My job is let me drink more Clemata and see if my memory comes back.
Yeah.
No, my job is normally to. That was breathing Clemata. My job is normally to kind of hear what you're saying, repeat. So what I was kind of hearing, we're talking a little bit about what you're doing with these performance loops is trying to play stuff in and listen to it and kind of. What I thought was nice was you were talking about listening to what sounds like you. So some of this material, you play it back, presumably doesn't quite sound like you, or isn't quite working.
That's not quite what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that what we end up with has my kind of signature. Okay. Actually, often when you're working with sounds, you don't want it to sound like yourself because you think, oh, I've done that before, boring, I want something new. So really I'm just looking for something that excites me, and I let one thing go to the next until I've got something that's more of a whole piece of music, and I know that process will mean it sounds like me in the end. That's what I'm saying, really. Yeah. How we get there is really an unknown thing to me, just like to other people. I don't really know where I'm going until I get there. But that's the exciting part of making music for me. And just to sort of elaborate on that a little bit, my interest is orchestration. So that means finding sounds that go with each other, that don't get in the way of each other, and that do the job of creating the atmosphere you want to get, or you're hoping to achieve. And that can be, simple things like spatial awareness, making sure that if you've got one dense sound in the mid-range over here, you don't put another one in the other side of the stereo at the same time here. You mix your sound picture in such a way that each sound has its place in a very wide picture. So I'm always thinking about those things when I'm putting these samples together. It's not just layering one on top of another, like a sort of dirty hip-hop record. I need my music to be more precise and more detailed and more clear than that. But I do love some hip-hop records.
Yeah, I don't know if that was applause for loving dirty hip-hop records or
I love dirty
hip-hop records. Yeah. That makes sense. I'm really anxious to hear what people are. There's so many cameras pointed at us now that I kind of want to take a question from the front row, who are also the only people who heard the first 15 minutes of what you just said. So
any questions, anyone?
Questions, especially this kind of question about processing things.
Please go on.
Are you mastering your songs by yourself, or you?
No. These days, he asked if I master my own music. These days, a little bit. More recently, I've been kind of mastering a few things just to save money, really, because mastering in studios can be quite expensive. But there's a guy I use who has also worked on some Depeche Mode, the re-versions of the old albums, Simon Hayworth, who I think has got a great set of ears. I really like what he does. And he agrees with my thinking about not too much compression or limiting dynamics within the sound, and just allowing the music to speak for itself, really. No radio compression and all this stuff. But working with him means I've learned a bit about mastering myself. I don't have the technology you really need. I have super precise valve equipment. But I know roughly how the record should sound. Yeah, I think so. I hope so.
Yes.
Are there questions from the front row? The few select people who heard some of the nice stuff that was said.
When will we see Recoil live again?
When will Recoil be live again? I guess I have to make some more music first, and I've been putting it off, but I will, I think, in the new year, really, this time, get into that studio. I don't know if it will be an album or a soundtrack, I don't know what it will be yet, but I will make some new music, and if I can get that finished and satisfactory for me, then I hope that I would try and get and present it on the road again, but in maybe a very different way this time. It's difficult for me to envisage doing the same thing again with this kind of laptop and film presentation idea. So I think next time it could be something quite different, but I just don't know what it will be yet. Thank you. Anyway, this is just a short chat, okay? I'm going to be back a bit later on to do the full thing after the second film is finished. And I can take some more questions from all of you then. And I'll be hanging around to sign some stuff and do some photos and all that. So as I say, this is a quick chat with Peter here, and I hope you enjoyed a quick chat with us, and we'll see you a bit later on.
Well, thanks so much.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
Thank you! See you a bit later on.
kurz, wie es weitergeht. Ursprünglich war ja geplant, das Question and Answer drüben in dem Club zu machen. Ist aber zu klein und Leute, die es nicht interessiert, die schwatzen zu laut. Deswegen machen wir das hier drinnen.
Hallo. Good morning. Yes. That's my German finished. It's English from now on, okay? So I hope you understand me. This microphone's working. We tried to do a Q&A next door earlier, but it wasn't so great because the mic didn't work. So anyway, I hope you can all hear me clearly tonight. We have a better sound system in this room. And I hope you enjoyed the film. Thank you very much. It's fantastic. Thank you. It's great to be back in Berlin, of course. I always enjoy coming here. The tickets sell faster in this city than any other city. So I guess with the history we've all had in Berlin, Depeche Mode and myself, we've come to expect to see a lot of people, and it's great that you always come and support what we do. So I'm very happy to be back, and I love Berlin anyway. So thank you for that. I don't know how many of you have seen some of the other Q&As that we did. I just make it up as I go along, really. There's nothing too much to tell you that you don't see already with the film. It's obvious what it is, so I'm not going to explain it all again. You probably know the story of how it got made. To me, that's the most interesting aspect of this film, is the fact that it was made out of pure love, really, with the help of so many different people who did it for free, really. The people who did the artwork for the Blu-ray, and of course the filmmakers themselves, all their crew, they offered all their services pretty much for nothing. And so in this current climate of music that we have, and the difficulty that artists have selling CDs and record companies and the problems that the industry faces in general, it's very heartwarming for me to see that there's plenty of people out there with passion and that are prepared to put their efforts, where their mouth is, and make something happen out of pure will. And I think between us all, this project was able to work because of that. So I have to really tip my hat and say how grateful I am to the filmmakers themselves. And of course we did our bit, and between us all we were very hard to sort of then work in the post-production process to make the thing actually get released and get it out to you people, and that's it really. That's all I have to say about the film itself. So really I'm here just to thank you. I'm just here to answer any questions anyone has. You can fire away and I'll do my best. I just want to say we also have Paul Kendall in the house. Really important. And he has a very interesting new hairstyle that he wants to show to you. Put it this way, it produces its own lighting effects, the hairstyle. So maybe we'll bring him out. He's hiding now. Now, where are you? And another person who's here tonight is Daniel Meyer, who I really love. We've had a great relationship for the last couple of years. He's supported Recoil on many of the live gigs that we played, with his brilliant architect music and much more besides. So he's going to be DJing next door, and he's also coming with us tomorrow to the Sound Edit Festival, which is in Lodz. So it's a very busy time, and I'm happy that so many people have turned up. There's a few other familiar faces to me here tonight, Evelyn Francois, and plenty of others. So it's great to see you all again, and please, anyone who wants to ask me a question, now is the time. Okay, that's it. Oh, here it is.
Just ask him some questions.
Just ask me questions about sport.
Favorite football team?
Arsenal!
Yeah, he supports Arsenal, I support Queen's Park Rangers.
And we're playing tomorrow.
Yeah, we've got a match playing against each other tomorrow. So, okay, any questions? Don't be shy. Okay, well I'll say goodnight then. Come on, who's got a question? It only needs one person to start and then it's easy. Yes?
Can you talk about the new
Yes, the Talk project is the question, and that's something that also Paul works on a couple of tracks with me. I was asked to take part in this Talk project, a band that I've always liked, and in fact they got better and better as their career endured, and made 2 or 3 fantastic albums, particularly their last 2 albums. And I was asked by a guy who lives in Brighton who's a massive fan. He started this project to make a tribute album and book towards Talk and asked me to initially just make one track, and then it developed into something more. He kept asking me, my opinion on other people's submissions for this album, and so I said to him, well, I think you better just make me a musical supervisor on this, and I can help you with it really. So I asked Paul to help me with the Recoil tracks. We ended up doing 2 Recoil songs with some great singers. Linton Kwesi Johnson, who's a sort of dub poet. Shara Gordon. No. What's her second name? Anyway, a lovely singer called Shara, and many others.
She's just lead vocal to me.
Shara Gordon. Shara Gordon. And 2 or 3 other people that are involved as well. So yeah, it developed into a much bigger project than I initially imagined, but very happy to be involved in it, and well, I hope it's called Spirit of Talk for anyone who doesn't know about it. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
Will you make a remix of a song from the new album of Depeche Mode? Have you talked about?
How many remixes am I supposed to do? I think that's very.
I liked it. I liked In Chains. Your remix.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they're not even thinking about remixing albums at this point anyway.
Okay.
They still would have finished their proper album first, haven't they? So, when it comes to collaborations of any sort, whether it's with Depeche Mode or anybody, I'm always open-minded. I always listen to people's suggestions and ideas. It doesn't mean I always want to do it, but it means that I have an open mind to collaboration. I enjoy generally working with talented people. That's why Recoil is the kind of project it is, where we allow many other musicians and singers and writers to be a part of it. For me, it makes it a much more interesting project as a result. So, of course, when other collaborations come along, like the Talk thing, or doing some other remixes for other people, I always listen to ideas and see if it's something that excites me, and if it does, I'll do it.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more? You're very quiet, very reserved. Yes, sir.
Hi. Where does your inspirations come from for a new song? Started with a bass line, or?
Yeah, it's a really difficult question to answer because I never really know is the answer. And, to be inspired, all I know is that you have to put yourself into the position where you can allow something to happen, which means going to the studio, switching those machines on and trying to do something. It's very rare that I sit in my bed and suddenly write a symphony. That just doesn't happen. So you have to create the circumstances, for ideas to thrive. That's it, really. I mean, I just don't know. But I was saying this in the other room earlier on. Part of the fun for making music for me is the experimentation and not really knowing where it's going to end up going. And from that process, even though it can be very frustrating and you're fishing around in the dark, sometimes a piece of magic just happens. We don't know why, and that's the most exciting part about making a record for me. So it's not, I don't sit down and write a song, I haven't done that for many years, I haven't really tried to do that. I just start working on music and some sounds, and maybe Paul might come up with some strange loops or something and say, look, what should we do with this, or you just never really know where it's going to come from.
It's a question of discipline as well.
Discipline, making yourself work, get in there and actually do something, yeah, that's quite right. Yes.
I'm very happy because I thought I have lost my telephone. Sorry, I found it on, and I have wrote some questions in my telephone because there I'm not very happy.
very happy for you.
Very
We've all done it.
Your telephone says.
I have some very easy questions. If you don't like it, say next question.
We'll pass.
But okay, we start with a very easy question. You like McDonald's, Burger King, or pizza?
None of the above.
All right. What song of Depeche Mode you don't like?
It's called A Heart is my least favourite.
Okay, I've ever heard it.
It's well known, but I was never very keen on that one.
I've ever heard it, and I think it's a lot of.
It was actually, I remember because it was actually recorded, and I didn't really have a lot to do with Depeche Mode, but I can remember that particular track because it was recorded in a garden shed in Reading, in Berkshire. Yeah. And it was really bizarre, you know, at the time, I was looking after Daniel Miller's Synclavier, which was a really beautiful piece of equipment, very heavy. And I'd take it to places like Hansa in Berlin and Hook in Denmark. And then I got asked to take it to a garden shed in Reading. And it was, I just thought there was something wrong. And there was obviously something karmic about this garden shed, because it was a really cramped track.
You said that. It wasn't one of the greats, let's face it. And what was frustrating for me was we also had Flies on the Windscreen as another track we were working on at exactly the same time. Which was considered by Daniel Miller and the rest of the band to be a B-side, and I was arguing, look, this is such a great track, it's so much better than the one we're calling the A-side. Can't we just turn it over and release them the other way around? And they never really sort of understood that at the time. Maybe I think with retrospect they might agree now. And we also had a record player called Neil Ferris, who didn't help matters either. So. Yeah, it wasn't a great video. What does your phone say now?
I think there are a lot of boring questions.
No, we don't want boring questions.
Okay, one question is, perhaps I didn't have read any books, but where did you live in West Berlin? Where did you live in West Berlin?
I never lived here. I stayed here at the Interconti Hotel.
Okay.
Martin lived in Berlin.
Okay.
He actually moved.
He's the short blonde one.
Okay, it's the next question. What do you think? If you go to Martin Gore and you say, hey Martin, can I have one stay and one tour, just one tour, what he would say?
Can I have one tour? That's not a question I'll be coming up with, I don't think.
We spoke about 5 years ago. And you said, oh no, but then came Albert Hall. You remember Albert Hall in London?
Oh yes, yeah. Well, that wasn't a tour, that was a one-off event. And yes, they asked me to do that, and I think everybody knows really what happened, and that it was a really special evening, I think, because it was just a bit different for them. It was nice to see them doing something else, doing a charity event, just doing something that, giving something back, I suppose. And I was happy to be a part of that when they asked me to take part. So that was nice, but you know, that's kind of all we needed to do really, and I think it worked well. Anyway, your phone's had enough. Yes?
Are you still using old synthesizers like the emulator or the Synclavier for your Recoil project?
I seem to actually use less and less gear these days. Because I guess the technology allows you to do pretty much what you need to do within the computer with Logic and sampling. I've always enjoyed samples. Now, obviously, you can just record live audio directly and you don't really need the sampler. Although the sampler can provide a different way to sample audio or present your sampled sound, as opposed to putting it directly as recording of audio into, say, Logic or Pro Tools or something. But I tend to be a little bit lazy. I don't enjoy the learning curve of new equipment, because I find find it very frustrating if you've got an idea of some kind, anything you want to try out, if the technology gets in the way of that, I get immediately frustrated and I haven't got much patience. And there are many times when I just think, oh bollocks, I'm just going to sit down and play the piano. I don't want to go through all this. Why is that not working? Where's the MIDI cable? You know, what happened to that, that effect? You know, oh well, Logic's decided not to play that one back. And, I mean, we've had how many millions of conversations, have we? You know, where we're just tearing our hair out. Well, some of it. So anyway, so I've reduced my equipment down to sort of the bare essentials, and I tend to stick with what I'm quite happy with. You know, he's more experimental. What have you got that's new, Paul? What can you tell us? Come on.
New equipment. I don't really.
Lots of plugins.
Plugins, yeah. The German ones are the best. I would say that. Native Instruments, I think, are an extraordinary company, and I pay for all of them, so I don't have a lot of them. But no, I think Native Instruments make really good stuff. I love things because I'm not a musician. I like when I can just put sound into something, and something completely ridiculous comes out the other end because it normally triggers something in my head. And Native Instruments. Core, I used to use Core a lot. It sort of fulfills that. And I've just been looking at the new Ableton, so I don't know if anybody from Ableton's here, but I would really like it. Great. I love those sort of things. I'm not a musician, I just like making noise, which actually dovetails really well with Alan because he's such an accomplished musician. I can make all this weird sort of crazy noise and takes it away.
And I throw it away.
Yeah, but then you can actually cut it and make it sound like I meant what I was supposed to be doing. So, that's it. Plugins, I love them. Sod guitars, sod synthesizers, plugins.
Any more questions? That's good. Right then.
I have seen.
Yes.
I've seen a video. You have special technical equipment. I need a called machine. Yeah, for live mixing and music. And my question is, have you made it before the show together? And
Yes, I mean.
or have you small or special parts for feeling live?
Yeah, I think I understand what you mean. Well, the thing is, we've never made any pretense that what you saw on that stage was anything other than really a presentation of the music rather than a live band. You know, it's nowhere near a live band, that's very clear. And I guess if I were to do it again, maybe we would probably incorporate more live performance. But at the time I guess I was too cautious and I wanted to make sure that the music that was presented would be a very accurate representation of what Recoil sounds like. So I wanted to prepare the music in such a way that it would work for an audience in a live venue, but it would be very accurately representative of the sound. And the sound, as we know, is quite sort of complex. It's not easily performed by a bunch of musicians. So if we were to take a bunch of musicians on the road, you wouldn't get what you hear there. You'd get something else, which could be great, but it would be something else. So we made no pretense. We said this is a presentation with film of music to which we add certain effects and elements of performance, but no more. And so that's what we did. I think if you talk as a performer, probably it's not fulfilling enough. And if I were to do it again, if Recoil goes on the road again, I'm not sure how it will be, but I would hope that we'd be able to add many more performance elements and make it a bit more live, really live, you know. So this was something kind of itself.
It's a sort of payoff between the visual and the audio, because the visual was so highly sort of developed. The audio couldn't really sort of viewer go away from what the visuals were doing. I mean, I think that's
up to a point. Yes, I mean they are interlinked, you know.
Yeah.
But then again, many sort of live performance productions are kind of linked into the visual side of the show. So I guess we could have done a bit more. But as I say, it was kind of designed to be what you see. So we're not trying to hide that fact. He does
my dancing was quite good though.
He does a lot of dancing.
Do you plan the next tour?
There's no plans at the moment, no, because I think I have to make some new music first. You know, that's the first thing for me.
So right now you're working on the new album.
Unfortunately, I'm not right now working on a new album, but because I'm here and I'm doing many things like this at the moment. But hopefully, you know, the plan is to get back in the studio in January or very early in the year and start working on something new. I don't know what it will turn into, but some new music, you know. And then, of course, there's a good reason to take it on the road and try to present it in a new way and do something exciting, hopefully.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, another question.
Yes.
Which song do you like best of Depeche Mode after you left the band?
I thought there were a few tracks on Ultra that were very good, Barrel of a Gun and Home. There's been a few others along the way. And I also like from the earlier period things like Never Let Me Down, Stripped and Walking in My Shoes. There's plenty of good Depeche Mode tracks out there. The venue for this, and I was surprised because I always imagine in Berlin, well I know in Berlin there's many good theatres and places that would be very appropriate for this, but we just had trouble finding one that was available for the right kind of higher price. Some of them are very expensive to hire, and we were always on a kind of budget with this. It goes back to what I started out by saying, that you know this kind of film a few years ago I could never have afforded to make, you know, with the modern technology, modern cameras, and people that have been willing to work for free have made it happen. And it's the same thing that we now encounter with playing or showing the film. You know, we try to keep the ticket prices very reasonable for people that have invested in the Blu-ray, and so we can only afford to hire certain venues and for the right, and to make it work, we have to make it work, make the budget work. So this was a good compromise. The people here have been very helpful, tying it in with their festival over the last couple of days, I think. And you know, this is what we managed to find. But it's been very varied. You know, we played a fantastic old cinema in Prague the other day, which was an amazing place. You know, and there are one or two other fantastic venues that we've managed to get in there for the right kind of price to make it work. So I guess that's part of the fun, is that each one is completely different, really. Yes.
You mentioned the visuals, and I would like to know, I mean, when I watched your live show, I felt really sucked into the music even more by watching these visuals, and I wanted to know how important are they to you, and how much are you involved in designing them?
Yes, we had 4 different filmmakers for the stage show visuals that are not related to the people who made the final film you just saw. So the original filmmakers, again, are people that have come to me over the years and expressed an interest to work on the music that I've made, and again have offered their services for next to no money, and just because they wanted to do it. Like I work with singers and writers that come into the Recoil project, I also take the same approach with filmmakers. In other words, I don't dictate to them what they should do. I give them a sort of rough framework. Obviously, in this case, I give them the music, but I don't say to them, you must make a film about this and that. You know, I ask for their ideas and I respond to that. And if I like the direction, then I encourage them to do more in that direction. If I'm not keen on direction, or I think it's good but there's some parts that are wrong, I'll give them that feedback. But I try and choose people that I think have talent in the first place and let them interpret what they want to do, you know, to the music. and it gives you just interesting and different results, I think. It's quite abstract. It gives enough scope that you can change the music and the film can still work. So it's, yeah, that's really it.
You're very quiet. Yes.
Just one more question back to the series. When you're looking back, can you remember actually to the concert, the show you have performed together with Depeche Mode in the 80s in East Berlin? Can you remember all of those emotions people had during the time? And is that something you can actually recognize also today, or is it today completely different compared to the decades before?
Well, people often ask me about specific concerts, and for me the memory of playing concerts tends to be a more of a generic feeling and memory, but there are some that do stick out, and Berlin in '86 would be one, because was it 86 or 88?
87.
87? 88, I'm sorry, he's taking issue with you. 88.
I wasn't born then.
I do remember that one because it was a unique thing for the time. You know, I don't think many bands had played in East Berlin at that time. And we had heard a lot of stories about the popularity of the group in that part, you know, of the world, or in Eastern Europe in general, in fact, not just Germany, but you know, many other countries too. And we kept hearing the stories that you're so popular in these countries, you must go there. And of course, many bands at that time just wouldn't do it because there were too many issues, too many problems. They didn't have the right equipment. You get paid in funny money. You know, endless logistical nightmares, visas, police problems. You know, and so most Western groups just said, "Oh, I can't be bothered with that." But we just heard about the audiences and about the people that were interested, and about how everyone was sort of buying the music or getting hold of it and listening on cassettes or whatever they could get hold of in the East Germany and other countries like that. So we took the plunge and we played that show, and it was one of the most incredible audiences. I remember people, as we drove up in the coach, I remember the lines of people outside, and just that reaction alone was enough to tell us. And you know, even the police were kind of part of the crowd, you know, and taking off their uniform and trying to get into the gig, because it was very difficult to get tickets. I believe there was a lot more demand than there were actual tickets. The legacy of having played all those concerts in Eastern Europe is still with us today. You know, I benefit from it now. Depeche Mode still benefit from it greatly because people remember that time, and I think they appreciate the fact that we and a few other groups, but not many, made the effort to come and play. So there are, of course, certain shows that stick out for those kind of reasons that I remember. Any more? Yes.
It's a question to Alan and to Paul. What are your favorite synthesizers and near-field speakers?
Near-field speakers?
What's your name to listen through?
Tricky. Near-field speakers probably would be Dyn Audio's BM somethings. I mean, I'm not very good on these technical things. It's that big. And they sound. Yeah, so that's near field. Synthesizers. That's a really difficult question. You know, it's funny because I've sort of throughout my life seem to have been linked with synthesizers, and I actually don't really like them. The only synthesizer I liked was one that wasn't connected to a keyboard, and I think they ruined synthesizers when they put keyboards on them, and so it would be the VCS3, the old sit-up English synthesizer, strangely enough. Very, very basic, but that's what I learned to make sound on. So yeah, that. I don't really understand Oberheims and Moogs and
plugins, obviously, plugin synths and stuff. That's it. Do you realise you're sitting next to one of the biggest synth nerds in Europe? Exactly. Look to your right. To your right. Monsieur François Blouard. How many synthesizers do you have, François? I don't know. Polycouple. Minimoot. Come on, tell us all. He's not speaking, he's gone all shy. Normally you can't shut him up. Okay, any more questions? Oh no.
I bought this MIDI desk and the pre-fader is not happening.
I did sell a mixing console to that man, so you know, I had to let him in tonight. What is it, Jonathan? Yes.
I wanted to speak about guitars.
Guitars?
Yeah. Most of your guitar sound are sample or played by a guitarist, and who is it?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I use quite a lot of performed guitar, and then usually just loops that I've collected from people I've worked with. When we made Liquid, I started off by hiring a group of musicians and asked them to just jam and play loads of different stuff, and we recorded them together. And then ever since then I've been pillaging, you know, taking those old recordings and just reworking them, stick them in a sampler, reverse them, and then ask Paul to put them through some strange effects. And then, you know, it's like regurgitation. So the source is often guitar, but the end result can be something very stranger, you know. Yes. Isn't that so?
We never used any of the bass from those bizarre sessions.
Norman's bass was a bit...
But the drums have been well used. A guy called Monty, really splendid drummer. And the guitar was quite interesting, but the bass, for some reason, is not happening.
For me, it's quite inspiring to have a lot of source material to kind of rework and restructure. If it's got a good inherent feeling, you know, or feel and good performance, whether it's drums, guitar, vocals, it's nice to have that material, but then completely turn it into something else and adapt it to other piece of music that I'm working on. If I've got lots to play with, I'm kind of happy because, you know I can just chop it up and I'm not searching around for some new sound to work with.
And what are your sources? CD or?
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. It's better for me if I've got some live performance, somebody's played something for me, you know? And then I can just take that, put it into the computers and chop it up and, you know, rework it into something completely new. But I know that the source material is the original material, so I don't have to worry if I'm sampling somebody else's work or something like that, you know.
And could you speak about time? How much time did you spend in the past, certain tracks, certain songs, and today?
Yeah, well, I'm slow generally when working, really slow.
Because it's cold.
Ponderous, I think the word is.
We are both quite slow, in fact, because we pay a lot of attention to detail, and I think both of us feel that the detail is really important and it needs to be absolutely correct, you know. I mean, he thinks I'm slow, but if I give him a vocal take to work on, he will literally draw the level of every syllable of every line, and he'll DS. He won't DS, he'll draw out sort of S's in a sentence to make sure that, you know, that doesn't become too loud. And he can spend days and days just on a vocal track, you know. So both of us, I think we...
Tragic people.
Yeah, we are very sad. Can you not tell by the sort of grey colour of his face? Too much time in the studio. Anyway, so yeah, it's never quick. Some tracks are a bit quicker than others. Jezebel was quick. Somehow that just worked fast. Others take forever. Most of them take forever.
Yes. Do you have concrete plans to collaborate with other artists except Talk Talk?
At the moment, there's no concrete plans, no. There's always a few people kind of around that I enjoy listening to or we would like to work with or whatever, but at the moment it's really, I would prefer to just start, and then that normally leads me on to thinking about someone who would be good to work with for that particular piece of music.
What do you think you're doing in 10 or 15 years? Are there any plans for the future?
Any plans
or the
for
altar?
Just to sort of not die. For a while, yeah. Anyway, that would be the best thing.
Very
Stay
generally.
healthy. Yeah, stay healthy. Just got a new daughter, so I want to see her grow up for a start. And, you know, if I'm not doing something creative, then I get frustrated. So I know that always tells me I need to be doing something creative. And music seems to be the thing I do best, so I'll just probably keep making music in some form or another. But whether it's just another album or whether I get more into film, I would like to get more into film work maybe. But yes, you know, you have to juggle it with your life, and my life can be quite complicated sometimes with children and families and houses and things that you have to organise. But I think I will, for the time being anyway, I want to keep making music. You know, that's what I might love most. Okay, well, I think we better leave it there because that was quite a positive note, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah. Okay. So I just want to thank you all again for coming along, and Paul and everyone here. I hope you enjoyed it tonight, and thanks as always for your support.
Enjoy the DJs.
Daniel Meyer, next door. I'm going to be around to sign, we've got some Blu-rays if anyone still needs them, and I'll be around to sign some stuff if people want that, and do some photos or whatever. So we're going to try and set that up now, I think, and that's it. So thanks again.
Dann kann man Stopp machen.
And